Welcome. Sorry about the tech issues. Before we get started, or at the beginning here, I want to introduce President Phil Sisson, who's going to give a brief welcome and start us off.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Students, it's great to see you. This is an opportunity for you to hear from some amazing writers, so whenever you get a chance to participate in the series, I really encourage you to do that. If you can find the headspace and the time to really come in and be focused. It's something we all need to do more of, that's for sure, especially around this time of year when it starts to get really crazy and hectic for all of us. Tom, to you and all of the staff and the creative writing team, we really want to thank you for your continued excellent work in this writer series. It means a great deal that this has been going on for many, many years, and it's always for the benefit of students and staff. So thank you so much for doing that. Krysten, we're delighted to have you here with us. Such a distinguished poet, and so excited to hear your work today. So thank you for taking the time to be part of our community here and enrich our community today. And thank you all for coming. Great to have you.
Thanks so much, President Sisson. Welcome. Again, this is the MCC Visiting Writer Series featuring today Krysten Hill. I'm Tom Laughlin, coordinator of the Creative Writing Program, and just want a few shout-out thank yous. Marie McDuffie Clark and her staff in the Office of Student Engagement help provide food, help yourself at any time, food and drink there. I want to thank Dean of Liberal Arts, Matt Hurwitz, and Chair of English, Jill Keller, for their support. Jeff Kaplan and his interns videoing this wonderful day today. I want to thank also Beth Noel and her staff in marketing to help get word out on these wonderful events. So today we'll hear from Krysten Hill, and that will be followed by a question and answer period. So thinking about your own questions, and also there will be books available afterwards to purchase. Would love to have you take a look, purchase, and Krysten Hill is here to sign for you as well. So Krysten Hill is a writer, educator, poet, performer who has showcased her poetry on stage at the Massachusetts Poetry Festival, Boston Book Festival, Blacksmith House in Cambridge, Cantab Lounge, Merrimack College, U35 Reading Series, Haley House, and many other venues. She is the author of How Her Spirit Got Out, Aforementioned Productions in 2016. It won the 2017 Jean Pedrick Chapbook Prize for the New England Poetry Club. Her work has appeared in the anthology City of Notions, an anthology of contemporary Boston poets, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, Poetry Magazine, the Baltimore Review, Pangyris Magazine, Painted Bride Quarterly, Winter Tangerine Review, Rust and Moth, and elsewhere. Her poem, City Girls Teach Themselves to Fly, was part of the Poetry on the T project, which posted poems on the MBTA trains, enabling MBTA commuters to, rather than reading advertisements, to enjoy reading poetry on their commutes. In addition to the New England Poetry Club Award, Krysten Hill has won many other honors, awards, and fellowships, including the 2016 St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artist Award, a Mass Cultural Council Poetry Fellowship, a Vermont Studio Center Residency, a 2024 Supporting Women Writers in Miami Residency, and the Kenyon Review's 2024 Peter Taylor Fellowship. She is currently the Jacob Ziskind Poet in Residence at Brandeis University, and her website, if you're interested, is KrystenHill.com. Of How Her Spirit Got Out, the poet, editor, and former poet laureate of the City of Boston has said, that's Danielle Legor George, former poet laureate of the City of Boston, has said, quote, Krysten Hill's poems grab you by the throat and pull you into dark rooms and dark cells. The poems know that the world is full of weapons and poisonous legacies that pursue and haunt us and become knives themselves, daring to carve deep silence into the sound and image, into resurrection. These poems exude at once vulnerability, rawness, and lucid beauty. Please help me welcome Krysten Hill.
I think that was the best intro I've ever gotten. Like, thank you for that. I'm always embarrassed when people like read the things I've done because for some reason that is really, it makes you visible in a way that you don't realize you've done these things and you're proud of them, but also I hope it's not too braggadocious. I'm just here and I feel honored to do the work I do. And it's not about the accolades. I think I'm just honored that I've been granted the opportunities to do the work that I do and to kind of talk to the communities that I've been able to talk to. So please, take that list for what it was, but please see the work that went into that list as well, and maybe also the vulnerability that went into the things that were in that bio. Tom, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here. How y'all doing? We good? I'm so glad that classes are here, that students are here. I taught yesterday, and I'm always excited when like students show up for creative writing. And I'm excited to also hear maybe separately about your own journeys and entrances into creative writing. So if you have any questions about that, let me know, and I'll try my best to answer. All right, let me start. On my paper. I'm gonna introduce myself with this one. So this is from the chapbook. This mouth, never your bird, never finch, never graceful feathered thing. Maybe litany, molting what it can't heal. Maybe pinwheel started with breath whispering, I love you, or today I will try. Maybe knife to core the apple of my eye, a blade that wants you blind. Maybe red kitchen where the kettle is hoarse from the heat underneath, where I boil my tongue to be rid of its stutter. Maybe humming while it sweeps the bodies of dead wasps from its windowsill, but never your bird sitting pretty and ornamental. Maybe a well-lit room that hurts your eyes before it swallows you, or an opening of skirt holding on to the hips of a woman that wears it well, or a cavity in the yard where I want to lay the language of better love, but never your canary, your parakeet, your sweet feathered thing that lives just to sing for you. I was just thinking about remembrances and witness. And so a lot of these poems are about kind of remembrances, but also how our communities show up for us, and maybe sometimes how our communities fail to show up for us. And so this is a poem about how communities showed up in a really unexpected way. And this is also for Stephon Clark, who was 22 when he was shot in Sacramento, California, 2018, in his grandmother's backyard. Girl breaking glass. Six of 8 shots hit Stephon Clark's back. I tell everyone because that's how I feel. The fact, a gutted deer in the sky. I wish it would rain. I tell the barista who just wants to ring up my coffee, the woman reading her phone on the train. I type it into my email subject line trying to send a message to my boss. I erase my subject line and try to correct my thoughts. There is no room for me to process police acquittals. I can't take the day off. I need to work to survive. My anger is displaced. I yell at my neighbor when she tells me to calm down. I feel nothing when she cries, surrenders her hands to the threat in my voice. How easy to imagine my body a weapon I've never owned. I'm sick all the time. I can't shake this cough. I'm afraid to heal. I call myself stupid when I knock over my wine or forget my keys. I take in sadness like a corpse holds water. My favorite place to cry is in public bathrooms. The black woman who shares the sink with me doesn't ask what's wrong when I come out of the stall, doesn't ask me where the why comes from when it drops like a blackened tooth from my mouth. She looks at our bodies in the mirror and reaches for me like my mama only does in dreams now. She's the first person I let touch me all day. The smell of roses on her shoulder is a grace I don't know I need until I'm already on my knees. One more sad one and then a hopeful. I mean, I feel like that was hope. I think that like I tell people all the time when they're like, do you write about happy things? You know, you always get that from some dude in the audience. And I always say, like, you have to work for my joy. Like, it's in there. You just have to, like, really look for it. There's something joyful about saying difficult things. There's a joy there. There's a resistance there. So I commute every day to work. I ride 2 trains. I live on the Orange Line in Boston. Unfortunately, on the train, I witnessed a knife fight between young folks. And I don't know what started it, but this was a poem that took 2 years to write because of the trauma of just witness. So keep that in mind. You don't have to write these instantaneous poems about troubling things. Sometimes it takes a minute. Knives. There was something about watching a boy on the train platform pull a switchblade on the smaller version of himself that made me wonder what the lesson was. When the smaller boy got rushed and the crowd made room, I thought for sure he caught the end of it when he screamed like the boy he was, all of 15 in clean Nikes. The smaller boy was fast, and when there was no show of skin, no proof on the platform, even he said, "Really?" at the miracle of his unslashed coat. Maybe it was that he could have been a student in my class chewing on his pen before answering my question about what Baldwin meant when he said, "One must say yes to life and embrace it wherever it is found, and it is found in terrible places." And another student said, after the cops shot his friend, they handcuffed him and let him bleed out on the sidewalk. Another said she keeps a machete behind her bedroom door when her mother is home. How small I sound when I tell them just to be careful. How words can feel useless in a knife fight. How weak I looked screaming stop with my back against the wall, while an older man pushed a bigger boy back at the smaller boy, saying, "Stop dancing and just do it." Sometimes I think about the unfortunateness of feeling helpful, but also just wanting more for your community. And wanting more from intervention, and wanting more from us to value our lives. I'm gonna read a whole one. I guess the hope in that poem was like the students witnessing and recalling and testifying and still being in my classroom to tell the truth. This is from a larger poem that has sections, and this is one section, a very short section of that poem. It's called, the whole of the poem is called, "I Keep an Anthology of Hope." An 8th grade student in my poetry workshop says that in America there's a hailing at my heart. Her story is a weather that changes the temperature of the room. Her classmates nod when she speaks lightning to the nights that have settled inside them. She sets the fields of their eyes on fire. Everyone's hands are hot in the air, and everyone is burning to tell the story of a time when they've come back stronger from exploring each collapse and creation they've witnessed. I forget how much we need each other. So I love plants. I have a sun porch where I have plants out, and this is a tradition that was started by my mother. She was an avid gardener, but we lived in the city. There wasn't a lot of room, so she kind of like filled this room with plants. And because of her, I do it, and it's a legacy that has continued, unfortunately, without her. But it's something that I have kind of carried on for my own survival. This is another poem that's hopeful. Damn, I need a minute. Because sometimes survival looks like a sun porch crowded with living plants, despite how much I've been told I can't keep anything alive. Every muscling green, kniving from the dirt, reminding me of my mama's tongue, laid up, a warning with roots. I'm learning to care for other living things and myself. I overwater my aloe and my liver. Forget my fern needs shade as much as my heart needs to sleep in the dark sometimes. Crowd my tomato plants the way I choke on thoughts of leaving myself. I kill them sometimes, I try again next season. I touch their new leaves when I can't sleep. Whisper my worry because what will be left for my children? Who will take cuttings and grow them in their own rooms if this world is dead? I give them what I have. My voice, water, house in winter. I fill my sun porch with the living and the dead, and I talk to both. I put soil on my tongue because I want to taste both. I remember how my mama said, I need a minute, when she got home from work and gave her tired to a chair, closed the door to the kitchen to escape her screaming house, and talked to her philodendron crawling up the wall. Like my mama packed a room with plants like gauze in a wound, I'm trying to know healing from the inside out, filling a space with what I keep alive and what has kept me. I need a minute to breathe in a room of reminders of my mama's cutting tongue. Just a few more, and then I would love to answer some questions. I'd love to hear from y'all, and I'll try my best to give you the answers that I have. This is a new one. I wrote this for a reading about Phillis Wheatley. Phillis Wheatley is considered one of the first African-American authors of a published book of poetry. And what's really interesting about Phillis Wheatley is that she was literally, stolen from West Africa and brought to Boston on a slave ship, and then purchased by the people who eventually raised her. And somehow there was an encouragement for her to write poems. And I'm really condensing her life and maybe butchering it. But this is just to say, Phillis Wheatley is amazing. Please look at the work of Phillis Wheatley. I was honored enough to be able to go to the Historical Society in Boston, and they have her desk there, her writing desk. And I sat at her desk, and I looked at her letters. So if you have a chance to go to the Historical Society in Boston, that is something they will pull for you, different things that you're interested in, and they're more than happy to do so. It's just interesting and complicated, her life. But what came from this was a short elegy. I think this is a little bit about my mother. I was thinking a lot about how Phillis Wheatley was separated from her mother at birth, and unfortunately, those paths never crossed again. And I was just thinking about her poems, like speaking to that absence, even if it's not directly there. So this is what came from that. Even if not visible in this poem, even if not visible in this poem, even a fracture has a body. Even the space between the words an elegy. Even if it is not evident to the reader, she calls to her mother an ache that turns her body inside out. Maybe not at her desk, but looking at the Atlantic, she imagined herself as part of a whole. Imagines impossible flowers in her hands with colors so brilliant there is no sufficient name for them in this whole world. Assembled just right, I imagine, finally, a bouquet Phyllis offers to her mother. It's really short. Sorry. I'm gonna read two more. I'm gonna read a new one, and this kind of links with the one that I previously wrote for Phyllis, but also for the Sun Porch. This is a new one. It's new in my mouth, so y'all gonna have to bear with me as I kind of move through the words. That's kind of what happens with new work. We're kind of trying to figure out what voice it has. For they will inherit. This is for my mother. In her absence, I water her plants, praying that she is somewhere also in the work I do. Carry cuttings of her spider plants in my suitcase to bring my inheritance home. Embed their new roots, admire how they know how to anchor, and all the small unseen energy it takes to just go on. Mostly, I collect water for them who kept her company on this earth. I ask them to forgive this poor substitute who doesn't sing the same to them, but remembers that she did and tries on a song. When I forget to pull back the curtains, they do not know the language of shame. They do it on their own. Send out longer arms to any slice of light in the room. I take the hint, open a little wider, so that what I inherit has what it needs. What life kisses goes deep enough to root. Inheritance too, a map for how to continue. I never meant to survive her. It will take me years to call this beauty, to accept the use of it. I wanted to show y'all really briefly, and then I'll read this last poem. And this is how this poem I'm about to read. This is how it started. In a cafe. This is how that poem started, and I thought it was like on the back of something from some event that I was at. I just thought it was cool for y'all to see that, like, I'll keep this forever, but this is how this poem started. I'm gonna end with this poem. This is called Nothing. There's hope here, I promise. Nothing. I ask a student how I can help her. Nothing is on her paper. It's been that way for 35 minutes. She has a headache. She asked to leave early. Maybe I asked the wrong question. I've always been dumb with questions. When I hurt, I too have a hard time accepting advice or gentleness. I owe for an education that hurt, and collectors call my mama's house. I do nothing about my unpaid bills as if that will help. I do nothing about the mold on the ceiling and it spreads. I do nothing about the cat's litter box and she pisses on my new bath mat. Nothing isn't an absence. Silence isn't nothing. I told a woman I loved her and she never talked to me again. I told my mama a man hurt me and her hard silence told me to keep my story to myself. Nothing is full of something, a mass that grows where you cut at it. I've lost 3 aunts when white doctors told them the thing they felt was nothing. The doctor told me that by the time they got to the hospital, there was nothing they could do. Nothing could be done when it called at their breathing. I sat in rooms while it killed them. I'm afraid when nothing keeps me in bed for days. I imagine what they become underground and I cry for them in my sleep where no one can see. Nothing is in my bedroom, but I smell my aunt's perfume and wake to my name called from nowhere. I've never looked into the sky and said it was empty. Maybe that's why I imagine a God up there to feel what seems unimaginable. Some days I want to live inside the words more than my own black body. When the man shoves me so that he can get on the bus first. When he says I am nothing but fits it inside a word and no one stops him, I wear a bruise in the morning where he touched me before I was born. My mama's shame spreads inside me. I've heard her say there was nothing in a grocery store she could afford. I've heard her tell the landlord she had nothing to her name. There was nothing I could do for the young black woman who disappeared on her way to campus. They found her purse and her phone, but nothing led them to her. Nobody was there to hold Renisha McBride's hand when she was scared of dying. I worry poems are nothing against it. My mama said if I became a poet or a teacher, I'd make nothing, but I've thrown words like rocks and hit something in a room when I aim for a window. One student says that when he writes, it feels like nothing can stop him. His laughter unlocks a door. He invites me into his living. Thank you.
So, love to have questions. What reactions and questions you have for Krysten Hill? I'm going to maybe start while they're thinking, Krysten, about your ways of healing from inside and the ways that you garden creations, and maybe ask you to talk about connections between that and your process, or ways that you bring your own poems to creation and nurture them.
Yeah. And this is just like a process question.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think that healing is a journey. I think that it's nonlinear. I think that there are moments where I'm just trying to write to get to the other side of something. And I think that those poems are always in progress. I think it's always a process and it's always progress. And sometimes poems help me kind of translate the things that are growing inside of me, but also the things that I'm still struggling with. I think I write poems more with questions in mind than I do answers. I don't always think it's a writer's job to provide an answer or a solution for things. I think sometimes we write to what we're trying to understand about all the dynamics of this world. And then in some way that something comes out of that. I will say other people's work has nurtured me, and like my influences have kept me alive and have kept me thinking about how to translate the things I want to do. I'm thinking mostly about Lucille Clifton. I'm thinking about, unfortunately, Dorothy Allison, who just passed away last week. She was a memoirist, fiction writer. I'm thinking about like brave women writers who have shown me ways to say difficult things in a truthful and honest way. Yeah.
What were kind of the challenges you faced, or if you faced challenges on publishing side of things, getting work out there, getting work?
Yeah. Challenges of that is just like me getting in my own way. I think about that a lot, how sometimes we just think our work doesn't exist in the world, shouldn't exist in the world, but that's not true. I'm really thankful for people who have like encouraged me to submit things even when I was terrified to do so, because I don't think I would have gotten a lot of work out in the world without that kind of that sponsorship, that support. My first chapbook actually came because I had one poem, and this publisher was like, we'd like to work with you to work on this collection. But without them and without that support, I mean, I think it's about the communities that are there to kind of encourage you to do difficult things. But it has not been an easy process. I think part of my submission process is to send out to like places I'm pretty sure this piece belongs to them, but just also to send out to one place that seems impossible. And that has been really a good tactic for me in terms of publishing. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
At what age did you start writing poetry, and was there any specific life experience that made you decide to choose this genre of literature in the first place?
Yeah, I struggled with reading and writing as a kid. I really, really struggled with reading and writing. I struggled with reading a book. My mother was a teacher, and there was just like a sense of shame around this difficulty to access writing. And luckily, my mother gave me Maya Angelou, Life Doesn't Frighten Me at All. It's a children's book. And I think I saw a way to write really simply, to write in fragments, to write outside of just like, I don't know, mandatory formal English language. Poetry provided me a space to write in fragments and to rearrange and to think about it. My mother also did a really great job of, she understood something about the way my approaches to difficulty on the page. And so she one of the first things she did was she gave me an unlined sketchbook, and that's something that I've kept with me forever. So part of my process, because of writing is difficult for me, I often like combine, and this is just, this is a new book that I just started. I write everywhere, right? It doesn't just come out, it comes out really messy. I love visual art, so like a lot of times I'm thinking about visual art and how it exists in my life, but having a more creative space, to kind of explore work has helped me. This is why it's messy, because like in that book I'm also writing letters to folks. The reason I say that is because that was a process that I had to hone at a young age, because writing was so difficult. I found a way to do it, and to write poetry kind of helped me in a less formal way to get things on the page. Yeah. Yeah.
What are things that help you get from kind of your big workbook into down to one little poem?
That's a really good question. Like, I have to like mine it for the good stuff. So after I get all that word vomit, out, I go back and I start highlighting lines that could be seeds to other things. And that's what carries over. I actually transcribe it from here to like the formal space of the computer. Having those in-between spaces really helps me to kind of get the word vomit and then distill it to something that is workable and functioning. And then I play with it on the page in the computer. But I have to start with handwriting. But I know that that's kind of out of style now. People don't do that anymore. But I personally have a really special relationship with handwriting and that kind of form of meditation. That's a great question. Any other questions?
While they're thinking of maybe other questions, I'd love to have you share our students transferring to other places. You have a degree from UMass Boston, and wondered if you could talk about maybe the creative writing and English programs at UMass Boston. You're now at Brandeis.
Yeah.
At Brandeis as well. That would be wonderful.
My main relationship with UMass was through, and Janelle, you can also speak to this. I was in the MFA program. So if you're thinking about like a master's program, UMass is really awesome because it's small, and you can work with fiction and poetry for the creative writing side. And I think our workshops were like 12 folks in a workshop. And similarly, when I'm teaching poetry, I usually had like 12 to 16 students in my poetry workshop, where when I was teaching critical thinking, I would have 30. If I was working with maybe a creative writing workshop, maybe I'd have 12, and those smaller workshops were really awesome. What else? I think for Brandeis, and I'm getting to know the Brandeis department, I think for Brandeis, they have a really great, in terms of undergrad, I teach really small workshops there too. So my workshops are maybe like, I think 10 to 12 students. Right now, I know I'm teaching a nonfiction class, I'm teaching an intro to creative writing class, which offers you like a variety of work that you can kind of learn, a variety of genres that you can kind of attempt. And then I know fiction workshop is also happening this semester, and then next semester I'm doing a poetry workshop. So students have an opportunity to take a plethora of different genres at Brandeis. And work with across the board with like really different genre-specific authors. Elizabeth Bradfield is the director over there. Stephen McCauley, I think his name is. He's the fiction writer, and we have a new fiction writer too. But I think what's really cool about Brandeis is that they make a really good decision to bring, and UMass too, bringing authors from other places in as fellows and as visiting artists. I think that gives students a good way of seeing kind of work outside of the Boston area. Yeah. Let me know, like individually we can talk about the program, and I can also give you contact information for UMass's creative writing departments and also Brandeis's creative writing departments. Yeah.
How do you work with artist block?
Yeah.
When you're experiencing an art block?
Oh, right. Yeah. I respect the silence, right? I respect that time when I'm not writing anything, because listening and being part of the world is also a way of collecting. So don't get down on yourself when you're not writing, because your brain is still collecting information. It's still collecting information, like influences. And I think one of the ways I kind of deal with that writer's block is like collecting visual images. Like that helps me, and then I'll write to the visual. Like I'll write to the visual influences that are around me. And I think in this sketchbook, I mean, here's a picture of my mother that I'm gonna write to later. You know, like I think about just collecting influences and kind of artifacts, and then writing to those artifacts is really useful for me. So like collect things in the world and see if you can write to them and have conversations with them. Yeah.
What was the most memorable thing that a teacher ever said to you?
That I shouldn't go to college.
Oof.
Maybe I'll think of something cooler later. But I think she was saying that because I couldn't afford the opportunity. Instead of offering me resources, or offer me ways into those resources, and I had to figure it out. But I remember thinking, that advice was terrible. Now, what do you do with terrible advice? You know, you kind of persevere and you find resources that counter that terrible advice. I have had professors, though, outside of that teacher, in connection with that instructor, who were like, I think there's something there. I think there's a light in you, and I want you to keep going. I want you to keep pursuing it. But I often think that there's like instructors, or if you're a mentor, or if you're in a place of power, encourage people, because you never know what they can do later on. I think that's important to think about. Anything else? Yeah.
Good.
I have kind of a weird question. I noticed that you write a lot about specific situations, your plants, in the MBTA. So one of the specific things I took note of was your poem Daffodils.
Yeah.
And you used the word keloid
Yeah.
really brilliantly, because I don't really think that a lot of people know what that means, but
Yeah.
I have surgery, so
Yeah.
I do. And I wanted to know if there was a specific incident that you learned that word.
Yeah. Yes.
And was it from a stabbing incident?
Yeah, like keloid, I grew up with a lot of folks in my family have scars from like living and from like surviving things. And I thought about keloid as like a specific kind of, not clump, but like scar tissue assembles and hardens and forms kind of like a protective surface that, you know, creates, it's a lot. But I grew up with like family who had scars, and I think about all the histories of those scars in the family.
Yeah.
And that's where that keloid came. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, that was really nice. 'Cause,
Yeah.
you know, as stitching.
Yes.
For the dress.
Right.
On the dress.
And I think that's how healing comes into my poems a lot. This idea of like having the visible presence of scars is also a testimony to your history of surviving something.
That's what I would say. It's
Yes.
your story. I'm not hiding.
Thank you for like catching that metaphor. No one has ever asked me about that before. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Anything else?
Krysten, can I ask, you're an amazing performer of your work, and I just wonder about how much that is part of the process. Are there poems that live more on the page than the performance, and what suggestions might you have for our students in terms of reading their work and getting their work out there
I think
performance-wise?
that's a great question. I'd say, like, no matter what genre you were messing with, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, poetry, you just need to learn how to read your work, like, aloud. Because it's just really important to, like, the translation of it and just embodying it. And I will say, like, one of the best forms of advice that I've gotten from an instructor is to take your time, to breathe when you're reading, to not rush through the work, and to make people wait on you with your silences. So respect your silences when you're reading aloud. I visibly mark poems on the page when I'm reading so that I know where to breathe. I wish I had a better example of that. But I visibly mark kind of slants in the line where I want to breathe. And also, that's so part of my editing process. When you had that question about generating poems, reading my work out loud is how I edit it. So I literally would read the poem over and over again to see where the words don't fit and where they don't work quite well. And sometimes that kind of revision happens even when I'm performing in front of people. I was noting in poems where I'm like, I'm going to cut that later because I'm having kind of difficulty accessing it with my voice. But, you know, read for your friends, get on really terrible open mics, find practice spaces that you can just try your work and have communities that support your work. I think that I wouldn't be doing what I was doing with my voice and with practiced reading without really terrible open mics and having practice spaces like that where I can try my work out.
Well, great. Let's maybe turn it over to individual conversations after this, but let's hear it for Krysten Hill. And I want to say she has books for sale, and maybe we'll set her up over there, and you can ask individual questions and have her sign the book for you. If you enjoyed today's reading and event, I want to have you bookmark. We've got a QR code for the Creative Writing at Middlesex website on the wall over there. We have a number of different visiting writers coming next semester. We have Danielle Allegro-George of Lesley University, has a new book coming out from Beacon Press in January. We have Maura Stanton from UMass Lowell, who's a creative nonfiction writer. She has a memoir, new memoir coming out, The Murmur of Everything Moving, that won the Donald L. Jordan Prize for Literary Excellence. That's coming out in March, and both of them will be reading. We also have open readings for students, other events, and I want to maybe just flip through our website. The QR code is there. But we have also archives of our readings. If you look at our events page, there are recordings, and there will be a recording eventually of this, hopefully, if that's okay with Krysten.
We also have a literary magazine, Dead River Review. Please check it out and please submit your work. There are a number of creative writers here. So poetry, fiction, translations, artwork, music, and that will be coming out in the spring. There's a call for submission with information on the wall also for you. So I want to have you take a look. There's also creative writing courses in our creative writing program. If you're interested in any of our courses, Creative Writing 1, Creative Writing 2 next semester, Creative Writing and Publishing, where students will be working on the literary magazine, and Reading and Writing Poetry is also being taught. So all those classes, if you're interested, happy to chat with you about those. So again, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you again to Krysten Hill.